Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to CPA webinar update on CA marking. My name is Fabiola, and I work as an events and membership executive for the CPA. Today, I will be helping our host, Peter Keblehorn, CPA Chief Executive, to run the webinar. With the government recently agreeing to extend its deadline for ending recognition of the CE mark in Great Britain until January 2023, this webinar will provide an update about outstanding questions and requirements ahead for both industry and government, including the critical need for capacity to support the new UK testing regime. There is much riding on the new system, not only for businesses, but to help ensure building safety and performance across the whole built environment. For the first part, Peter will give you an update on the subject. The last 15 minutes will be dedicated to answering your questions, so please feel free to type your queries in the Q&A box. At the end of the presentation, I will be reading them out to Peter. Before turning the floor over to Peter Keblehorn, I want to remind you all that the webinar will be recorded and the chat will be active for comments. However, I invite you all to type your questions in the Q&A box. I hope to post the recording on the CPA website within the next 48 hours. Thank you. Peter, you can feel free to begin.
Fabi, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon, everyone. A little bit of context before I get going, and it clearly is a tricky time for industry generally, quite apart from this week's issues over carbon dioxide and gas prices, which will obviously have their impact. We are seeing a huge amount of uncertainty across the whole of manufacturing. So all of the issues regarding border friction, regarding commodities on the world stage, regarding a plethora almost of issues are really affecting construction, manufacturing, and the general arena of construction, manufacturing, sorry. And for me, the CA mark and all the issues around it are just another element of uncertainty. Now, if any of you have actually been following some of the work we've been doing recently, primarily through the Construction Leadership Council, we have had a focus on CA marking for some considerable time now, because we feel certainly for the smooth operation of the construction sector, making sure that the new system that the government have brought in, primarily featuring CA marking, needs to be done smoothly. Now, unfortunately, we have had quite choppy waters up to now, and we've had a lot of discussion with MHCLG, who now are DLH&C, by the way. We've had a lot of discussions with them in terms of the issues that industry is facing, and trying to ensure that the government officials across a wide range of government, not just DLH&C, but everywhere we can relate to this kind of issue, to make sure that they all understand that the situation that industry faces is real and is urgent. So the headlines, of course, are that just very recently the government moved the deadline for the switch between CE and CA marking to the end of next year. And that is very welcome, without a doubt. It's broadly 16 months of time that is very, very much needed in terms of moving industry across to the new system. But of course, the headline belies some of the complexity beneath it and some of the issues that we currently have to address. And so, of course, CPA are still committed to ensure that we work our way through all of these issues so that industry has a fair chance of at least achieving a smooth transition to the new system. But we currently are equally concerned that there will be potentially shortages and hold-ups in terms of getting products onto the marketplace. And they are fundamental in some cases, and they affect some crucial parts of the construction industry. And I'll explain some of those in a little bit more detail as we go on. So the issue for us certainly is, how do we transition from CE marking to CA marking? After all, that system's been in place for around 40 years. And the necessary complexity behind it about certification and testing starts to demonstrate some of the issues that we have in terms of making this change. So if I start with the UK capacity and capability in providing the necessary certification and testing, many of you who've visited this subject before will be aware that, of course, in order to achieve a CE mark, it is not in any way, shape or form a simple process. Lying behind it is the system of AVCP with its various grades of processing from 1 to 4. And for the most part, this involves interactions between the manufacturer and the certification and testing body. And those processes have been well rehearsed, well in place for a very long time. But what isn't immediately clear is that the testing and capability of the UK arena is very, very much smaller than that which is available across Europe. And of course, not all testing and approval bodies are certified to do the same work. So the issue for the UK is that there are quite a few products, quite a few topic areas that actually simply aren't covered in the UK, or if they are covered, they have a very limited capacity to do work. So as it stands, we face a situation where, if you wish to place a product on the market that has previously been covered by a harmonized standard, now moved to be called a designated standard, then that has to work its way through the process of being certified and tested by a UK-based entity, and that facility has to be accredited through the UK system. So this immediately raises the question that, in fact, if a product has been tested or certified through a EU-based body, then the product has to be retested and recertified. This is particularly a shame because clearly a product that has not been changed, so physically it remains the same, technically it remains the same, it seems a waste of resources, energy, and finance to actually take that product through the system again because of a overall policy change. But that's what we're embarking on. So the issue at the moment is that there are a significant number of products that need to be pushed through the system, and some are finding that relatively easily, and some are finding it incredibly difficult, and indeed some finding it impossible. This largely depends on what capacity and capability it currently exists in the UK, whether the product is subject to an AVCP 1 through to 2+ or 4, or whether it is a System 3. System 3 causes a particular problem with this change, and therefore we find that those products primarily who are under the System 3 category are having a real challenge in terms of making this change. Now, Therefore, we have started to look at the underlying issues around this and to see if there are any avenues of discussion to take this forward. I mentioned just now that we have had lots of conversations with the government about this, and they are looking at a number of ways in which this potentially could be overcome, certainly in the short term, but possibly changes to the whole system to make things a lot more straightforward. In many ways, this is overall a transitional problem. Once everything is moved to a new system, potentially we have got much smoother operation. But nonetheless, we're still faced with quite an uphill battle at the moment. So the issues that remain to be tackled in the next few months primarily centre around how we deal with System 3 issues. How are those going to be tackled? Well, we then come on to focusing on the capacity and capability of the UK testing industry. And this in itself raises a number of problems, because it is not totally obvious when you look at the current structure of the industry how much capacity exists. And all of these are commercial bodies, and therefore they are undertaking work on the basis of a commercial relationship. So if they are not convinced that the marketplace exists, then they necessarily won't move into a new area or won't expand their capacity. That's been a subject of some considerable debate and discussion. So in order to make sure that we have a smooth transition and grow the UK industry, we have to make the case for the fact that additional testing and certification is needed. And again, this is not always straightforward or easy to identify. And of course, there are commercial sensitivities that creep into this situation. So the progress in trying to develop this has been relatively slow and has emerged primarily out of coaxing from industry all the various issues that they are seeing and wish to be corrected. So overall control of how the testing has and certification takes place comes from UCAS. So UCAS have been firmly in this discussion from the beginning, and we see a gradual development of the UCAS position. Having said that, there is, shall we say, a little bit of tension here in what the UK government would like to achieve versus what UCAS may be able to achieve, because they are governed themselves by procedures and standards that are clearly laid down. So we have somehow to unlock some of this process in order to have a clear view of how the UK industry will go forward. So we are in the middle of some of that discussion, and we will see over the next few weeks how that is going to step forward. Another issue that has crept up, which is quite unfortunate for the UK market, is of course, whilst we are trying to ensure that all UK manufacturers can move to the new system, during this interim period, which has now been extended to the end of next year, it means that currently European manufacturers can, of course, place things on the UK market. This has the unfortunate consequence of creating an unlevel playing field. Unfortunately, that's a net result of moving to the new system, but also allowing the UK industry enough time and enough space to actually move over to the new CA mark process. Undoubtedly, this is unfortunate, but nonetheless a reality of how we may go forward. A further consequence for overseas manufacturers who want to come on to the UK market, once we move past the end of next year, they too have to have their products certified and tested using a UK-based entity. And again, that is inclined to create pressure on the UK industry as those manufacturers seek those approvals. But of course, it may also mean that they decide not to go through that process and withdraw products from the UK market. That remains to be seen. And that would be unfortunate, because many of the class of products in that position are fairly high-end or fairly niche products by their very nature, and they would be sorely missed within the UK industry, I'm sure. So we need to do all we can to keep things flowing in that direction as well. So I've mentioned many times the capacity and capability of the UK industry. What does that actually boil down to in detail? Fundamentally, there are two groups that we need to focus on. One is the UK group of technical assessment bodies, and that is primarily a replacement for the EOTA group. And the other is the UK group of approved bodies. So if I just tackle the technical assessment bodies first, the conversation there between the UK group and the EOTA organisation, which primarily covered the whole of Europe previously, has been around, can the UK group use the existing guidelines, the existing processes, the existing standards in the UK under some sort of arrangement. This has been developed quite well, and there is agreement in principle. The slight sticking point there is that the authorization to use their fundamental information has also to come from the EU Commission, and that permission has been requested, but as of yet hasn't been given. Having said that, we hope that progress will be made as it has been on a fairly slow basis, but nonetheless progress has been made, and therefore we look forward to not in the too distant future, the UK group of technical assessment bodies being able to use the EOTA information and perform their tasks across the UK. Now, that means that effectively technical assessments can be processed and the operation as used to be undertaken by EOTA can continue. That doesn't necessarily mean to say we've got enough capacity, though, and enough capability, but it does mean that we've got a UK process for assessment bodies, which is really good news. The other group, the group of UK approved bodies, has been a slightly more tricky operation to move into a new organisation that reflects the UK's position. Several meetings have been taken place, and we now have a group meeting on a regular basis, which is extremely good news. The unfortunate thing about this part of the equation is that there is a need of an administration and a group to manage this whole part of the testing and certification industry. And unfortunately, that we haven't got to that position just yet. So there still remains questions over that part of the sector. So we need to get to a position, though, I would say, where we have all of the organisation in place that's needed, all of the management processes in place. And then on top of that, we can then start to address, well, what parts of the manufacturing arena have UK facility and which don't. And then we can start to figure out whether they can be grown on a homegrown basis or whether we need to look at alternative processes. And what I mean by that is that in our discussions with government, we've been trying to work out, are there any alternatives? Early on in the Brexit negotiations, there was talk of a mutual recognition agreement, which would have solved an awful lot of this at day one. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and it's very clear just at the moment that the EU's position is they won't entertain any discussion of a mutual agreement at all. So that kind of precludes that quite simple and straightforward approach. Maybe in the future that might be forthcoming, but certainly at the moment we're in a position where effectively we have to find other processes. So there are ways and means to get around this. Potentially we could license organisations overseas to undertake work on behalf of a UK testing or approved body. That has its own challenges, but at least it would get us through some of the capacity problems that we currently have. But unfortunately, I think that's fairly well down the road, because if we're talking about a short fix, that isn't there. We could also talk about perhaps there would be short-term agreements to use existing documents, perhaps on a short-term licensing basis. And also perhaps we can look at some sort of compromise over reviewing existing testing and certification. I'm using fairly general language here because clearly some of these things have commercial sensitivities. Some of these things are quite difficult to organise, particularly with the number of different parts of the equation that are governed by other standards and regulations. So, excuse me. So I'm trying to give a sense of optimism, but I'm also trying to give a sense of the fact that it's a great deal to work our way through here. And as I say, coming back to that 16-month deadline, many of these things are going to take every ounce of energy and negotiation power to get ourselves into a good position by the end of that time. It is also apparent that in order to get the certification and testing in place is going to take some months. And on top of that, when you have the facility organised, when you have it able to start work, many of the processes for many materials and products actually take a great deal longer than just a few weeks. Some that have been reported to us take many months. And so clearly the prospect there is before we even start on this new phase of this problem, we are going to run out of time. So we will obviously be discussing that with government as we go forward. And it's important actually that we make sure that everybody in the sector who is able to can provide us with information. The kind of feedback that we've been looking for, and I'll come on to a bit of that in a minute, is very clear factual details of where industry is disadvantaged, where there is additional cost, where there are impossible deadlines or very difficult deadlines. We've got a lot of good examples now, but I would use this opportunity to ask for any others. Please contact me and send it through, because that builds the case that we do need either alternatives to help with the transition, or unfortunately we probably need more time. And I know government has said that they will not increase the deadline, but I think if we do not have some sort of flexibility, we are going to get to a situation where products will simply not be available on the market because they won't be allowed to work their way through the system. Before I move on, I just wanted to talk about another parallel problem, which is UK reach. Now, we have been aware again of the problem affecting reach and UK reach for some time, But we have been giving the lead to that in discussion to the Chemical Industries Association, who are much better placed to discuss it. But just to contextualize this conversation, because I think it has immense parallel and it needs to be clearly identified as another issue causing disruption and possible delay in getting products to market. The issue with UK REACH is, again, it's a shift to a UK-based system from a European system. There are a number of set deadlines, which at the moment are all racing towards us and conclude in the autumn of this year. The chemicals industry has said that to re-register all of the chemicals needed to be re-registered and taken through the process will take far longer than the deadline that's been set, and will also, over time, cost the industry many millions of pounds. So we again await for discussions to progress, but we would certainly be urging government to look at the situation, because most products that are produced have chemicals in them, and those chemicals are governed by REACH, by UK REACH, and that depends on whether you can place them on the market. We also have an obvious consequential situation where if a chemical is, shall we say, too difficult to place on the UK market because of the various new regulations we have, it may well just be withdrawn, and that in turn for manufacturing causes problems if those chemicals are fundamental to the product being safe, or to the technical or performance characteristics of the product. A complex issue, but one that we again need to monitor very closely. And wherever we can, of course, we will be helping with the discussion with government and also bringing forward any examples we can to ensure that the government is well aware of the issues. In all of this, nobody is criticising the actual move to new policies. That is the government's domain, and that's what they do. But what we do need as industry are clear and straightforward and practical ways of moving from one system to the other. And I think that's where the debate and that's where the challenge comes, and that's where the CPA has been hopefully providing clarity and obvious examples of where we need to have compromise, or where we need to seek alternative measures to get our way through this, to get to the new systems, without hopefully disrupting industry too much, particularly as I started by saying, with all the other disruptive factors that are currently underway. And the important thing also to recognise is that the construction industry is a large chunk of the UK economy, £130 billion worth. Product materials take up at least half of that value, and therefore any disruption to the UK construction industry and getting products on the market is going to have a significant impact. Delaying products in vital areas such as new housing, hospitals, infrastructure is not what anybody wants, but clearly some of these issues around these new systems, unless we can find ways through it, are going to cause disruption. And that's what brings me on then to highlighting some of the examples that we've had from members. And again, I'm very grateful for members throwing these at us, because clearly we need that detailed information to help support the discussions. So we currently have particular issues with trying to certify roof lights. with cement mixtures that are put into renders and mortar. We also have a detailed submission from the insulation industry about ensuring that they can get their new products tested. We have a particularly detailed submission from the sealant industry, where some of the testing and certification for sealants takes a considerable amount of time, because clearly you have to cure sealants to make sure they're working properly, and they are facing significant problems. We've heard from the glass industry that, in particular, solar glass, laminated glass, glass for durability, and also for security. All of those specialist types of glass are seriously inhibited at the moment in terms of getting placement on the UK market. We've also heard from the UK radiator industry that there is very limited capacity in the UK, and this is significant, of course, for the housing industry, and we are facing a real problem, perhaps where there are very few radiators to put into the new houses that the government is hoping that the industry builds. We also have heard detailed information from the building services industry around fire systems, and in particular key fire safety products, all of which obviously have a very detailed process for placing on the market, and all of which come under a significant problem until we increase the certification and testing capacity within the UK. We've heard from the Timber Association, from the electrical cable industry, from the road traffic sign industry, and from the adhesives industry, all of whom have provided us with detailed submissions in terms of the problems that they face at the moment. So let me try and finish on an optimistic note if I can. We've come a long way since we started the discussion more than a year ago on the whole issue of CA marking and the changes that were to be put in place. I think we've come to a greater understanding between industry and government over the issues and the details of the system, the details of the processes that need to be gone through, and also a really good reflection on the issues that spiral out from all this conversation. How companies are governed in the sector about what they can do and what they can't do, and also the timeframes that are needed for all of this work to be undertaken. We will continue with regular CLC meetings to ensure that the conversation doesn't drop, and we intend to meet with government colleagues on a regular basis and talk through potential options and potential ways in which we can ensure cost to industry is minimised, safety and security obviously of products is continued to be a focus, and confidence that products that enter the marketplace do have the full certification and testing that they need. As a separate adjunct to this, we are clearly in a position where we want to ensure that the quality of products and the information about products on the day that we've just launched the Code for Construction Product Information, it gives everybody, users, specifiers, anybody in the industry and the wider public as well as government, clear confidence that the UK products industry knows what they're doing and delivers the really good quality products that they are renowned for around the world. So we have a number of challenges, and we have a number of issues that still need to be worked through. We have come a long way since we started the conversation, but we still have a long way to go, unfortunately. So I hope this has been helpful and informative. And as Fabi said, if you've got some questions, I'll try and answer them. And we will take it from there. But for now, I'll say thank you for your attention. And of course, we will hopefully in a few months' time be able to come back and report on an update. And ever optimistic, I'd like to think that will be a favourable report. So thank you for now.
Yes, Peter, we already have some questions from Mark Nichols. What is the best advice if there are no UK certified testing bodies for our product ranges? Can we declare to CA marking based upon CE marking testing, or can we not?
No, unfortunately, that's the nub of the problem. To place products on the UK market from the end of next year, they will need to have been certified and tested through a UK-based entity, and even where we've got companies that have got European arms to them, if you like, that they are still precluded. So the challenge we've got is that that's the status quo, and the only answer we've got there is to make sure that government is aware of your particular products, your particular sector problems, and as I've just been saying, work our way through trying to find answers that will enable those products to continue to be smoothly placed on the market.
Thanks, Peter. From Alexandra Beltrao, what about changing the AVCP3 to AVCP2+ in the UK for some products? Then the system will be rely on the manufacturer's testing assessment capacity. Is this solution on the table?
I think that, again, that sounds very desirable, but it is riddled with complexity. At the moment, the AVCP system is fairly widely used. If we step out of that particular system, then it sets all of our products on a slightly different trajectory. One thing that I didn't mention, of course, is the worry of divergence of standards in the future. And that's something, again, that we're looking at closely for how things go forward. And then certainly I know that British Standards is also looking at that closely. But I don't think moving to a homegrown or a different version of AVCP is going to help us. I think it's just going to make things more complicated. Bearing in mind that any changes we make, if UK manufacturers want to manufacture into Europe, then that increases the complexity. Equally, European manufacturers want to base their processes on the same system, because then they have the same problems when trying to export into the UK. All of these issues, unfortunately, do have an unintended consequence, and that's what we're trying to deal with. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. From the same person, what are the current views of the UK government regarding the current revision of the CPR acquis that include AVCP system and product families in which the UK is not involved? Is the UK government Secretary of State going through a similar process, or will the UK simply copy the EU outcome?
Very good question, and my honest answer is I don't know. And I think the issue at the moment is just to get us through the transition, so that we take on board the current CPR processes, and obviously the EU has been reviewing the CPR for some time, and all the information I've got tells me that this will take a very long time before they come to a conclusion. They've ranging from scrapping it completely to a complete change to some sort of halfway house. It's fairly well acknowledged, I think, that the CPR hasn't been working in the way it was intended originally, but has got a lot of good elements to it. So I think the UK government at the moment will be happy to get through the current process and get everything established as it needs to in the UK. I would strongly recommend the UK government doesn't move away from keeping in sync with what the EU will do, but of course that's up to a future policy decision. And if that happens, then we will have to work with what we find at that particular time.
Thanks, Peter. We have another question from Nick Ralph. Hi, Peter. A two-part question for me. First part, in light of the extension to the Great Britain's acceptance period for CE marking, will tests undertaken by Great Britain companies and EU test labs between now and 31st December 2022 be accepted for UK CA marking purposes? Second part, post 31st December 2022, will all tests need to be undertaken in UK labs for the purposes of UK CA marking, or only AVCP 3 test?
So let me answer the second part first, if I may, Nick. I think that's fairly straightforward because we just moved to the new system, and the answer is effectively yes. We will be expecting everything, I believe, to be tested through a UK-based entity. With regard to the interim period, that's slightly more tricky to give you a straight answer to. As it is, the situation we face up until the end of next year is the status quo. So I'm assuming, but I might be wrong, but the answer is that the normal process that we've been running through for the last 30 years will continue to be the one that's accepted. A little point to throw in as well is that the actual regulation that makes the change has yet to be placed in front of Parliament. The regulation to enact this change was going to be through the Building Safety Bill, but the bill was delayed, so that was one reason why this couldn't come in on the January the 1st next. I believe government is now looking at using a separate piece of legislation to do the actual enactment. So at the moment, this is not in law, it's a policy position. And we will see the detail when we see the provisional draft of the SI that comes through. So that's why I'm hedging my answer on that one, I'm afraid. As usual, a very useful question from Nick Rolfe. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Peter. From Steve Knight, I was under the impression that there was an agreement that AVCP 1 product testing in the EU would be recognized by the UK approval bodies, but is this not the case now?
That's not something that I'm aware of, actually, and I can certainly check up on that. But I thought that the whole system was moving from one basis from an EU basis to a UK basis. But I can certainly check on that, and we'll make it clear on the website. Thanks,
Peter. From Helen Gemmel, our products are tested in the EU. We are advised to take advice from our certification partner on this, as it is not possible to retest all our products for CA marking. They are telling us that EU data will remain valid come 2023, unless there is a change in the standard or the product. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that's wrong. My thoughts are that the whole issue that we're facing is that, and the EU have been very clear, and the UK government have been very clear. So when we make the change at the end of next year, EU-based documentation is no longer valid, and the reverse is also true. And I'm afraid that's the harsh reality as I understand it. We may see a softening of minds, we may see a change of policy, but at the moment that is what we're heading into, and that's why we're undertaking a huge amount of work to try and ensure that we don't get products stopped from being on the market or held up from being placed on the market because of that particular principle.
Thanks, Peter. Do you have time for one last question?
By all means.
Okay. So do you have a sense if many companies, particularly SME manufacturers and distributors, still don't really understand whether this affects their product? Could this issue still throw up surprises in 2022?
I absolutely have no doubt that in being in construction for as long as I have, one thing I'm very clear about is that the 3.5 odd million people that are in construction, the many thousands of SMEs across the sector, it means that quite often even really well publicized information, well made points quite often don't filter through to everybody quite as fast as they should. I've no doubt we have an awful lot of people across the sector who still aren't aware of the changes or aren't aware of the complexities that we have to go through in order to navigate these new positions. I'm also very well aware that we've got probably quite a few unknown unknowns that are still lurking behind all of the information we've currently got to hand. I find it quite interesting that every time we have a meeting, there is somebody that is able to demonstrate a different example or a different experience. And there's also a lot of conversation, particularly in such a complicated area as this, where people get hold of, shall we say, slightly the wrong stick, which is why I've tried to be as straightforward as I possibly can this afternoon. So, as I say, I've no doubt that we are nowhere near a conclusion with some of these points yet, and I've no doubt we've got a lot of things to overcome. The only thing I can say is that the CPA will continue to work hard to pull up all these issues and to try and make them clear to as many people as possible, so that as an industry we can go forward with some sort of confidence.
Thank you, Peter. I think our time is up for today. So once again, thank you everyone for joining this webinar today. We hope you found it interesting. If you have any further questions or comments, you can email me and I will pass your questions on to the right person in the team. If you are interested in joining CPA, please have a look at our website and feel free to get in contact with me again. Finally, the recording of this webinar will be available over the next 48 hours on the CPA website. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice rest of the day.